By watching this video, you will learn how to set up PhpStorm and do a simple web project from end to end. So let's get started. In the previous screencast, Windows users used Chocolate to install PhpStorm. Mac users installed development tools using Brew. Brew does not install PhpStorm, so Mac users will have to manually install it. Fortunately, it's not very difficult. You just go to the download page and go ahead and download it. And then open the disk image. Drag it to the applications directory. There we go. We're ready to go ahead and go on to the next step. Now that that has been installed, now the Mac and the Windows users are now in sync and are ready to actually go ahead and download the PhpStorm settings. To do that, you go to the pre-work page and you download the PhpStorm settings for your operating system. Since I'm demonstrating on a Mac, I'm going to go ahead and download the Mac OS X version. Now, Chrome and the other browsers will say this file is dangerous. The reason this is because jar files can contain executables that do have malware. This is a trusted source, and so we're going to go ahead and keep it. But thank you, Chrome, for your vigilance. Okay. Now, what we have to do is go ahead and open PhpStorm. Okay. And one last thing for the Mac is that you get the security warning the first time you open an application like this. Go ahead and click Open. Now, for now, we're not going to import settings. Okay. Now, the next thing we have to do is go ahead and register with JetBrains. JetBrains will give you 1 year for free with PhpStorm if you register an account. To do that, you go to jetbrains.com/student. The link is provided with the screencast. And you click on Apply Now. And it's a really neat account. It gives you access to all the JetBrains products like PhpStorm itself, WebStorm, which is a good JavaScript IDE, and Python Charmer. So go ahead and fill out your information. It's real important, though, that you sign in with your CNM email. This is a university account, so you have to use your educational account. And go ahead and apply for the products. Of course, I don't need to do that because I already have an active account that I'm going to go ahead and sign into here. And there we go. Okay, now we're presented with the PhpStorm welcome screen. Now from here, we want to do a little pre-configuration here. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and configure import settings. And let's go ahead and import from our downloads the jar file that we just downloaded. This jar file, contrary to what Chrome told us, was not malware. It is actually the settings that we use at Deep Dive. So let's go ahead and import that. And select everything. And it needs to restart. That's okay, PhpStorm. Go ahead. And we're back with the same screen, except for now the configuration settings save just a few things that need to be configured already. So we'll go to configure again, go to preferences. Need to double check something here at version control, Git, and make sure the SSH executable is native, not built-in. And then click test. And you should get version as well as of the time of the screencast 2.14.3. Your system may vary a little bit. That's okay. Just make sure that you get output similar to this. Okay, great. Now we're ready to start using PhpStorm to actually create a project. How exciting! Okay, to create a new project, we're going to have to first create a new repository here on the GitHub side. So I'm logged in here to GitHub. Make sure you are logged in as well. If you're not already logged in, log in. And then you click on New Repository right here. Your list of repositories should probably be empty, but click on New Repository. Okay, good. Now we can create a new repository. We're going to just call it pre-work. And then the description will be deep dive pre-work. Okay. All right, so make sure that it is public. And click this, initialize this repository with a README. If you don't do these steps, the repository will be not very usable. So we'll add a license. We're going to add something called the Apache license. We'll get into the really, really deep technical and legal discussion as to why deep dive we choose the Apache license. But basically, these licenses here are just like choices of what open source licenses you wish to use. And we do have some pretty specific reasons for preferring Apache over the others, such as the LG, PL, and MIT. That's a deep discussion for another day. Let's go ahead and create our first repository so we can get started with actual web development. And now you're presented with this. These are all the files that you have coded. It just starts with the default README, which just has the name of the repository and then the description. That's all that is. Then the license is the Apache license. Before we go to PhpStorm, there is one other thing we want to take care of, which is something called a gitignore. So the gitignore file is named .gitignore. Make sure it's named .gitignore, not gitignore, .gitignore. If you forget the dot, a kitten dies. Think of those kittens. Do not forget the dot. Senator Arlo says so. Okay, so the gitignore file is a list of files that we do not want Git to be handling because they could interfere with the project or cause confusion, or they're just simply files that we don't want Git to know about. So we're going to go ahead and put in two. First of all, /.idea. The .idea directory is created automatically by PhpStorm and the other JetBrains tools. And having it on Git is problematic because these can contain sensitive usernames and passwords sometimes, and it also contains your preferences for the screen settings, which means that you'll be trying to commit and push and use the settings of your other group members, which inevitably you're going to have different window sizes and font colors and different operating systems, and it gets really confusing. So that's why we say, okay, .idea, the PhpStorm preferences, we don't want that. The next thing is .dsstore, and that's capital D, capital S, underbar, capital S, small t, small o, small r, small e. .dsstore with that capitalization. Be careful about that. .dsstore is basically an internal Mac OS X file that can cause confusion and problems on Git. Git repositories, I want you to always git ignore this file, even if you're not a Mac user. Windows and Linux users, I still want you to ignore this file, irrespective of whether you use Mac. It's a good idea to add it to your .git ignore. And we just go ahead and put a little comment here. So we just added a template starter git ignore, and go ahead and commit the file. And there we go. Now, as you can see, we have the first files in the repository 3 minutes ago, and we have the git ignore template right there. So we're now ready to start work in PhpStorm itself. I don't like creating files on the GitHub web interface, with the exception of this .git ignore file creation process. The advantage to creating it here on the web is that a lot of people learn the hard way. If you don't put the .git ignore in correctly, you'll end up committing and pushing those files you didn't want in there, and the only solution is to delete the entire repository and forget the project ever existed. And I have a lot of people who protest, but I had the .git ignore in there. I said, well, it's too late. You don't put on your seatbelt after the car crash. It just doesn't work out. It's basically what that comes down to. Anyway, let's go ahead and grab the clone URL. So you click on clone or download. Make sure it's with SSH. HTTPS might be the default, and if so, click on use SSH. You want to be using SSH. Do not use HTTPS. You should use HTTPS under no conditions, for no circumstances. I don't care what the story is. Use SSH. We have to copy this, and so we got a nice little clipboard button right here. Let's go ahead and use that, and it copies. Great. We can continue now to PhpStorm. One last operating system specific note here. For Mac and Unix users, you need to create a directory called bootcamp on the desktop. I really require this because when we come around and help in the classroom, we're going to be automatically looking for this directory for all your files, and we're most able to help if everybody has the same directory structure. So go to the desktop and create a new directory. Call it bootcamp. Please make it bootcamp with a small b, no spaces, just bootcamp, one word, all small. Okay. The Windows users should already have the SSH key file in here. In Mac OS X and Linux, that does not apply, so it should be just empty. That's fine. Now, Windows users, wake up. I want you guys to do this as well. So all operating systems, Linux, Windows, and Mac, please do this. Please create another directory here called git. Git, all empty. All small. And it's an empty directory. This is going to be the base for all of our projects that we're going to be creating during class and during pre-work phase. So I want to have everybody with the same directory structure and well organized and ready to go. So again, you should have a directory called bootcamp on your desktop. Windows will probably have an extra file here for their SSH key. Mac and Linux won't. And then we should have an empty directory here called git. Everybody should have that. Don't leave one without it. All right, so we'll go ahead and check out from version control now. Now, what are our options? There is this option called GitHub. It's actually quite tempting. It's not what we want. We want to use Git, not GitHub. Git, not GitHub. Git, not GitHub. I think I made myself clear there. So we go ahead and use Git, and let's go ahead and paste in the URL. Great. Now the parent directory, we just created that directory called bootcamp git. We just need to tell PhpStorm about it. So go ahead and browse to it and select it, and make sure you have that right. That is desktop bootcamp git. No matter how your no matter what operating system you're using, it should end in desktop bootcamp git. Directory name is automatically set to pre-work. Now, There's a little pre-flight checklist. Let's go ahead and test it. Make sure our settings are okay. There we go. All right, now let's go ahead and clone it. And would I like to open that directory? Yes, please. Great. Now PhpStorm has this new project and is ready to go. And as you can see, the 3 files we had on Git are here with us. Okay. Now we need to do something called creating a deployment. But to do that, there's a little pre-step. So open up the terminal. Okay. And SSH into CNM. Windows users, you're going to have to use PuTTY instead. However, the steps are the same once you're SSH'd in. It's just that you're using PuTTY and Mac and Linux users are using the terminal. Okay. Now, what we need to do is go into our public HTML directory and create a new base for this project. So to do that, once we're SSH'd and connected, you do cd space public HTML. And notice I typed in PUB and then hit tab. This is tab completion. I highly recommend using tab completion on the terminal and in PuTTY. It's great. It's wonderful. And for those of you who are suffering from mistyped things without using tab, you're basically dying of thirst in the desert with a water bottle in your hand. Not using tab completion is a mistake. Get to know tab completion. It really, really is awesome. So anyway, cd space public HTML. Now, if you'll notice, my prompt changes and tells me I'm in the public HTML directory. That's great. And now all I have to do is mkdir space prework. And what this does, it creates a new empty directory called prework. And that's all I need to do right now. I have created a new base, a new destination on CNM for this pre-work project. I'm done here. I'm good. So I'll just type exit at the prompt. Always type exit at the prompt before closing terminal. It is much more graceful and doesn't put lag on the server. I can close terminal now. Now we can create the deployment over in PhpStorm. So to create the deployment, I go to Tools, Deployment, Configuration. Now, here's all my deployment settings for all the projects I've done. Since this is actually a clean virtual machine, I haven't done any projects here, and so it's blank. That's okay. We're going to add a new one. So we're going to go ahead and click plus to add a server, and I like to add one deployment per project and name it after the project. This one's called pre-work. And be sure to select SFTP. SFTP is secure FTP. Be sure to select that, otherwise it won't work. We don't respond to FTP or FTPS connections. It's SFTP. Now it gives me this. All right, so the host is going to be bootcamp.coders.cnm.edu. The root path. Now, there's a little trick here, so I'm going to temporarily skip it and put in my username. So there's my CNM username. Put your CNM username there. The auth type, we're going to actually put it to OpenSSH config and authentication agent. And by selecting that, the password field goes away. We're actually using password-free configuration now. Now go ahead and click Test SFTP Connection. That makes sure that everything is sane. You may get this question. As per the previous screencast, PhpStorm is never connected to CNM, so it's wondering, is it okay if I start connecting? And of course, yes. And we're successful. Good. Now I can come back to root path. There's a little bit of a trick here. If you click on Auto Detect, it fills in something for the root path. This is not correct, but it's a head start. So that's good. It's a head start. But emphasis is not correct. If all you do is click Auto Detect, you're going to ruin your files. So we need to actually have the exact path that we just created in terminal, which is home, your CNM username, and Auto Detect picks up on that. What Auto Detect doesn't pick up on is the fact that we need to move into public HTML pre-work. So we'll go ahead and do that. /public _ HTML pre-work. We have to add that on. That's why I like Auto Detect. It does the first part of the typing for you. Mistyping, of course, is the biggest cause of software bugs, and so I like to use any trick or trade that reduces typing. It's wonderful. So Auto Detect actually is your friend. Okay, web server root URL. First of all, it does HTTP by default. We are at HTTPS. We don't respond to clear text and secure, so it's HTTPS. And at the end, again, kind of like the root path here, we have to tack some things on the end because the default settings only go so far. So it should be /tilde. That's a tilde, not a tack, not an underbar. It's a tilde. Your CNM username, pre-work. So it should be your CNM username, pre-work. I did not type public HTML. That is on purpose. It's not supposed to be there. Public HTML is only there, not there. Now we have to go to the Mappings tab, and we just have to use a slash in the deployment path. It's just a slash. And then we can press OK. We are ready. Almost. There's one little value-added tax we have to pay. Then we're ready. So we go to Tools, Deployment, Automatic Upload. This will upload every time we save the file by hitting Control-S or Command-S. Automatic Upload. It's your friend. You love it. Finally, we're going to go ahead and do something which is I like to call a mass upload, which is like right-click the project and hit Upload to Pre-work. And this will go ahead and send all the files to CNM. And I get this little window right here, and it says Upload to Pre-work complete. Okay, cool. So I'm going to take a little pause here. What we're doing is we are using GitHub to sync our code, and we are using CNM to present our code. Notice my use of verbs there. Listen carefully. We're using GitHub to synchronize our code, using CNM to present our code. Synchronizing is all about the software team, the software developers, the people actually coding. They need to remain in sync. Presenting is, of course, for the end users, the people who actually want to use your software, the people who actually want to visit your site. Website visitors are not interested in your code. And so that's why we say GitHub is for teams, deployment is for users. This is real important. A lot of people just gloss over this and just think one is the same as the other. No, nothing could be further from the truth. Remember that Git is all about the software team, and the deployment and the presentation is all about the user. So let's continue with this. Continuing down the road here, let's go ahead and create a new file. We're going to create an index.php file. PhpStorm does have these templates. I personally don't care for them. I suppose you could use these templates if you want, but I'm satisfied as long as we have correct output. So I'm going to create a new file. Call it index.php. Index.php, all small. The reason for being real strict on the file name here is that index.php has a special meaning, so when the user lands at the pre-work directory, it automatically loads and displays this file. Now, I should get this question, do you want to add this file to Git? Do I want other developers to know about this file? The answer is usually yes. And this is why we made a big deal about the git ignore. Because what gets a lot of people in trouble is that PhpStorm will ask about these toxic files that shouldn't be added. And they just mindlessly say yes without even considering that it was a bad file and should never have been added. And so again, that's why we have to make a big deal out of git ignore. Anyway, this is what we want to add. This is something we like, so we'll go ahead and say yes. All right, so let's go ahead and test this by writing the simplest HTML possible. So the first thing we're going to write is the doc type declaration. And that basically says we're going to write HTML5. Then we're going to start off by opening the HTML tag. There we go. So there's our HTML tag. Notice how we're using lang n here. Means this page is in English. This is actually really important. It may sound trivial, but actually it's really important for the internationalization of the web to display what language you're using. The next is the head tag. This, of course, is the header, the metadata. So I only want to put two things in here. The first one is made a char set UTF-8. This has to do. This actually has a lot to do with the language. We're in English, and then the char set UTF-8 is which character set we're going to be using, and this UTF-8 is our choice because it accommodates English, Spanish, Japanese, Hebrew, Chinese, Romulan, Klingon, etc. That's UTF-8 is flexible for pretty much all world languages. And so let's just go ahead and create a title tag here. All right, so our title is I completed the pre-work. Okay, good. So we'll create a body tag. This is, of course, what the end user sees. The stuff in the head is just metadata. It's not really displayed, except the title will appear on the tab name. We'll see that in a second. Now, the body tag is the actual main part of the HTML document, and we'll go ahead and create a p tag. There we go. Okay, world's simplest HTML document. Go ahead and save it. Now, upon saving, it actually should upload in the background. So let's test that out right now by clicking one of these little browser icons. I'll click on Chrome here. It should open up a new tab. And there we are. I completed the pre-work. And notice this right here matches my title tag. There's one last thing we need to do here, which brings me to a subtlety before we end the screencast, is what we just did is we uploaded. This is called uploading. Uploading is sending your code to where you're presenting it, in this case CNM. It sends it to your host so your end users can enjoy it. Now what we have to now do is what is known as commit and push the code. This doesn't send it to CNM. This sends it to GitHub. And again, like I said earlier in the screencast, GitHub is all about the developer. It's all about the team. We need to tell the team, hey, we've got this new HTML for you to work with. So the team can be notified and know about it. So we'll go ahead and press commit. And now we're ready to commit. And as for a commit message, I want to ask you, please be very thoughtful and succinct on these commit messages. Get yourself in the good practice now of writing really just a one-sentence summary of what did you do. That's what Git is asking you. Git is asking you what you coded. And the last thing you want to do is be too vague, or this is really tempting and is the ultimate laziness, and we will find you and hunt you down, repeating the same commit message over and over again. This is a journal, this is a log that the entire team reads in order to figure out what happened and how the software evolved. Writing useless commit messages makes the repository itself useless. So please, just take 30 seconds, that's all I'm asking, to create a thoughtful and succinct commit message. Four simple words is all we needed to add a starter index page. Again, get in the good habit now. Start off on good habits. That commit messages need to be succinct and informative for the team. Now, commit. Commit and push is what we want. We'll go ahead and press that. But before I push, let's talk about the difference between the two just for a sec. Committing. Committing is you have a copy of the repository on your laptop's hard drive. Committing is basically saving your work there, but not telling GitHub a thing. This has its upsides that we can get into later, but the decoupling of this is part of Git's fundamental design to where you're not forced to send to the server if you don't want / need to. Now, push. Push is where all the commits that you have stored, that's when they're sent to GitHub. That's the moment where we trigger, we've got stuff here, we're going to send it to GitHub. But essentially, pretty much every time I want you to select commit and push. It's the simplest and most straightforward way. The use cases for committing and not pushing are limited, but they do exist. So for now, as a rule, just hit commit and push. One last note on that is that what if you hit commit instead of commit and push? Well, first of all, that's because you were paying attention, so there. But besides that, there is a way to go ahead and push when you have merely committed and need to push. You can press Command-Shift-K or Control-Shift-K, and it'll bring up what you can push. Right now it's empty because we just were able to successfully push to GitHub, and so there's nothing to push, but that's how you get that window back, is Control-Shift-K or Command-Shift-K. Now, if you come back to the repository and reload the page, you should see that we added the starter index pages right there. And you can see the history of commits here. The initial commit when GitHub created it, added template gitignore when we were creating our gitignore, and finally added starter index page when we just pushed from PhpStorm. And again, that reinforces my previous point about creating thoughtful commit messages. Your assignment is to do two things. First of all, send an email to me saying that you completed the pre-work. And that way we can have further contact and have a pre-work appointment with you before we start the class. The second thing in the meantime is to continue to the other more thematic pre-work videos that cover HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. For each one, I want you to try everything in this environment. Specifically, please create a repository and a deployment for every section of the video. It's real important. Pre-work is not all about mastering the material. Pre-work is more about warming up with the material and getting a handle on how PhpStorm and Git interact and getting used to using them. The more prepared you are with learning the tools and how they work, the larger advantage you're going to have in the class. I cannot overstate that familiarity with tools goes a very, very long way. Avail yourself of this time, this opportunity to keep practicing with the tools. Come back to this video as much as you need to get used to this process. I don't think this process is difficult. I think it's maybe a tad tedious, but not difficult. So, while you're watching this video, you have familiarized yourself with Git and PhpStorm, how they interact, and how to create a small web project from end to end. You may now proceed to the next screencast, as well as contact us for a pre-work check-in appointment.